Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Frankie's Open Mic. I'm your host, Haley Overseth of Frankie's Podcast Network, and I am joined by Murray Angel, Murray Jackson of Love Reiki as my co-host. And I'm so excited for us to introduce our guest. I'm going to pass the ball to Murray to introduce Aldwyn.
Thank you, Haley Overseth. Grateful to be here with you both. Aldwyn, welcome. Please let me take the stage and introduce you to everybody who's joining us today. It brings me great joy, and it brings me even more honor to stand here in front of you and to introduce you for the queen of media that you are. Today's guest is the incomparable media queen herself. Aldwyn Altuney is a trailblazing photojournalist with over 40 years of experience across global media. She's the founder of AA Xposé Media and the visionary behind initiatives like Global Good News Challenge and the Animal Actions events, which you can find on Facebook. Get ready to be inspired by a woman who truly lives her mission to uplift humanity and the world, one good news story at a time. Please welcome our special guest today, Aldwyn.
Yay! Thank you so
Hello,
much.
Aldwyn.
Thank you, Murray and Haley. So honored to be on your show. Love what you do.
We're so
So
excited
grateful to have you here with us, Aldwyn.
We love your energy, and we love the bright, vibrant light that you bring into the world. And I know Murray wants to start off with a question that he's wanting to ask you, so I'm going to let him start the proceeding.
I think the question is self-explanatory at this point. With such an introduction and so much to get out, maybe you can take us back and do what most of our guests do so peacefully here and just bridge us. Give us the pathway to how Aldwyn became the media queen. Where did it all begin for you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, my media experience actually started when I was 10 years of age. I was the top junior table tennis player in Sydney. And I first featured in the Manly Daily, which was the local paper. And I remember being in North Bargalla, which is where we lived at the time, in our garage. My dad had built this purpose-built back garage so we could fit a table tennis table in there and we could have coaches come over and train, etc. And the photographer and journalist came out to our place in North Bargalla. And I remember looking at the photographer at the time. This is back in the film days, right, where every single photo counted. And he got up on a ladder looking down at me on the table with my bat and ball. And I was looking up at this photographer taking a photo of me for the story. And I thought, wow, that looks like a really fun thing to do. I'd love to do something like that one day. And that was really where my curiosity peaked about the media. And then at age 11, I was on Cartoon Connection on Channel 7 in front of 2 million people. And I actually remember being in the studio in Sydney, and it was on Channel 7, and there was this massive camera in front of my face. And as an 11-year-old, I had this pink jumper on. I remember this.
I love it.
Which was actually way too big for me. I love the big baggy jumpers. I had this big pink jumper on. And I remember the host looked at me. I looked up at the host, and she was trying to relax me before the show. And she said, look, just don't think of the 2 million people watching this right now. And as an 11-year-old, I remember looking at the camera and I froze. I was like, 2 million people watching this. It's all I could think about. And it was the worst interview ever. However, what they did have in the studios, they had a table tennis table. And my brother and I got on there and we just started doing forehand to forehand. We just started, just keeping the ball on the table. And they had the clapping machine going, made it sound like there's 50 million people in the place. It was like, huge applause of us just all on the table for more than sort of 2 times. And we were like, well, hang on a sec, you haven't seen our chops, you haven't seen our smashes, you haven't seen our really cool shots. But the thing is, often we're so close to our genius that we don't realize how amazing the things we do are because we do it all the time. And the thing about that too is the media love to entertain. They don't just want to educate, they love to entertain. And so thank goodness we can play table tennis there because the interview was shocking, right? And then interestingly after that, At 13, I did a radio show at Radio Manly Warringah, and I used to write poetry as a way to release my anger.
Oh.
I was actually, I was born as a first-generation Australian in Sydney, and so there was actually a lot of racism and a lot of bullying when I grew up. And I actually felt for a long time that I didn't belong. I felt invisible. I used to watch a lot of negative news. In fact, my dad is one of these people that used to watch just not just one channel of news. He would go from like the local news to the national news to the world news. We'd watch at least 2 hours of negative news every single night. And back then there was no social media, and that's what we were exposed to. And I remember one night being so upset by what I saw on the TV that I went to Dad in tears and I said, why is the world like this? Why are people so cruel? And he hugged me and he said, darling, he said, that's just how the world is. And then I started to see evidence of why the world was so nasty. I started to see animal cruelty. I started to see kids fighting in the park. I started to see people being really nasty to me. And I actually was very, very angry for a long time. And I didn't know how to express that. My dad always said, anger is danger. And so I internalized that, which many years later I realized actually led to depression for me. And also do a lot of self-harm. I actually got, went completely off the rails in my teenage years. But one way I expressed it was through table tennis, right? I got my anger out on the table, used to express my anger through table tennis, then express my anger through poetry. And then moving forward, I got kicked out of home at 15, went on this crazy downward spiral where I went from top of my primary school. I was what they call ducks of the primary school at North Balgowlah Primary School in Sydney. And then I failed everything in year 11 at Mossman High School when I got kicked out of home at 15. I just basically, everything Dad said to do, I basically did the opposite of. And if I was my dad, I would have kicked me out as well. But you know what? It was one of the best things that he did for me, because I moved into a house with a drummer who was in a whole lot of bands. His mum was an alcoholic. Sister was dealing drugs. It was a crazy household that we were jamming and partying every night. And in that environment, 6 months into that, I saw my boyfriend sleep with my best friend in front of me. And that was the big turning point. That was when 15 years of age, I thought I just can't handle this anymore. And thank God back then, no mobile phones. This is right. I got on the phone and I called my mum in tears and I said, I can't handle this anymore. And she then spoke to my dad, who was very strict, very strict European background. And he said, okay, I'll let you come home under the condition that you apply yourself and you study hard and you get into uni. That was always the conditioning we had, or do your best to get into uni. And so he changed my environment. Very, very smart. They actually changed my environment. I went from Mossman High School to Forest High School in year 12, worked really hard, got into a media degree. And I actually ended up majoring in photojournalism and TV production during that media degree. I ended up with high distinctions, edited the university newspaper Curio for a year and a half. And I actually became the longest serving editor of that newspaper. And what I used to do is I'd watch stories in the media, like things that angered me or upset me, and I'd write about it. So one of the first stories we did was an anti-duck shooting story, because I couldn't believe people were shooting ducks for fun. And the headline I remember very clearly, "Go and get ducked," was the headline, right? And then we did things about,
Go and get ducked.
Yeah, that's so cute.
Go again, and then we did things like on female circumcision, on recycling and the environment, on battery farming of chickens and what happens when you buy cage eggs as opposed to free range eggs. And whatever it was that I saw that angered me or upset me, I would write about. And I thought, if I can just impact one person with this story, it's worth putting out there. And then from there, after that, for 20 years, I worked as a journalist, also as an editor in various facets of media. And also acting, and we've created short films, and I've worked in all facets of media. Then for 20 years, I worked mainly in TV, radio, print, for 20 years as a journalist. And then for 20 years now, I've had my own media and photography business. We do videography, photography, and PR mainly now. So we help people package up their message now and get out, be seen, heard, and known through the mass media. And of course, the last 20 years, we've had social media, which has changed the game completely. So that's a little bit of background. And, I've had, in that time, I've had 4 friends who have suicided as well. And this is partly, why I started the Good News Day in 2018 and the Global Good News Challenge through COVID. That's been going every single month for free. We've had people all over the world do that now, sharing, live videos, sharing gratitude and good news, which has been really great to see so many people, being a stand for more good news in the world.
I love
it's
that.
just needed more than ever right now. So thank you, Aldwyn, for sharing that.
Thank
We'll put
you.
those links at the end of this as well, so that our followers can find these beautiful respective pages and become part of these communities like us.
I do
Thank
love it. And that's a really impressive, intense story for your upbringing and experience and where you come from. That's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of joy and excitement in that sort of like table tennis playing and getting that recognition at a young age and being able to see that and be exposed to that. So you sort of have that introduction to what you're passionate about now. But obviously there were other adversities and emotional difficulties built into that, right? I mean, we talk about those
you.
things now as being childhood traumas and sort of, you know, PTSD is a thing that people would say. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how through your journey you've kind of learned to process or work through the conditioning, first of all, of sort of, well, that's the way the world is, and like being told that that's the way the world is instead of being told that there are good things as well. But then also having to overcome the conditional love aspect, right? Where your survival is dependent upon the support of your parents, but at the condition that you go to school, at the condition that you become successful, at the condition that you apply yourself, right? So that
Mm.
there is that survival mode emotion built into that. You know, as you've journeyed through, how have you sort of been able to process that for yourself?
It's a great question. Oh my gosh. You know, self-awareness is so huge. And it wasn't actually until many years later that I actually had a self-awareness of some of the traumas that I had in my childhood. And because often what happens is we block out traumas, and we often, you know, we forget about them. Sometimes we actually block it out of our conscious memory. And it was actually, you know, when I was doing a course, it was actually landmark education. I was doing the landmark forum I did in 2006. And I remember during the landmark forum at the time, so I would have been 32 at the time. And I remember being there in landmark. They were saying, you know, something happens to you in life and you make it mean something. You know, something happens, you make it mean something. And there's a pattern that happens through our life, that something happens and we make it mean something. So for example, someone cheats on us and we make it mean that all people like that are you know, no good or whatever, right? And so I was thinking back, and they said usually up to the age of 7 something happens, you know, that can, you know, really impact you for the rest of your life. And I was thinking, gee, what happened up to the age of 7? And then it came to me, and I remembered this incident that happened when I was 6 years of age. Now my parents migrated from Turkey to Australia. They were actually Christians in a Muslim country. And so my dad actually, particularly my dad, because he grew up quite poor over there, he was knocked a lot because he was Christian and because his dad was Ukrainian. His mum was Greek, dad was Ukrainian. So he, you know, it was very fanatic back then and very, you know, and you know, I wouldn't say I'm religious. I do believe in one God now. I think we all have different stories around what this God or consciousness or, you know, is. However, that's for everyone else to decide for themselves. But you know, he copped a lot of flack in Turkey, and so he couldn't wait to get out of the country. Basically, even though he grew up there, he never felt like a Turkish citizen, and so he migrated in 1970 with my mum. And they came to Australia with, like, you know, 2 suitcases, you know, a few $100 in their pocket, and they started life from scratch. And the first time they went back to Turkey in 10 years was when I was 6 years of age. And I remember being in my grandma's place in Iskenderun, a place called Iskenderun in Turkey on the south side. And there was this beautiful big sheep that I befriended that was down in the basement of my grandma's place. And I used to go every morning. I'd go and cuddle the sheep and pat the sheep. And, you know, this was my friend, the sheep. And I remember one day I was so excited. We were taking the sheep out for a walk. We went back to Turkey for about a month, right? So we're there for quite a while. I was really bonding with this sheep. And so excited one day, we're taking the sheep for a walk. And I remember it was a beautiful sunny day, a big green field. I'm walking along with this sheep. And at one point, someone put me on the back of the sheep. And then I was walking with the sheep with my arm around the sheep. And then next thing I know, at this point, there's actually, my whole family was sort of off to the left, I remember, and they were laughing and talking and, you know, catching up as they hadn't seen each other, hadn't seen them for 10 years, all the family. And these 3 guys came up that would have been twice my size at least, and they grabbed the sheep. 2 of them grabbed it by the feet, and the other one grabbed it by the head, and they dragged it onto this concrete block in front of me, and they pulled out a knife and they cut the sheep's throat in front of me. Now the sheep was squealing and screaming, and I was screaming. I couldn't believe what was happening. I screamed my head off. I went to go and try and save the sheep, and my dad held me back. And I remember just witnessing this sheep get slaughtered in front of me, which was my friend the sheep. And I ended up running away from everyone. And in that moment, it was like my innocence died. It was like a part of me died with that sheep. And I still get emotional about it today, even though I've done so much work around this. And, I'm actually very grateful for the sheep nowadays, right? I've actually, I have done a lot of work around this, but that was the moment that my innocence died. And I ran away from everyone. I sat on the side of the road and I bawled my eyes out. Eventually, I came back to the family, and they put a blood cross on my forehead, which is,
it's a part of the culture, but
it was a part of the culture. And the idea was that blood cross protects you, like in the Bible, it protects you from, evil spirits, from bad things. It, protects you and blesses you. And what I didn't realize at the time, this was a Turkish tradition or Greek Orthodox tradition where they sacrifice a sheep when family comes from a long way away, and they feed the meat to the poor people in the village, right? Which is actually a really, noble exercise and a beautiful thing to do. However, for me at the time, I had never seen anything like that. I was, and like over there, they do it all the time. So it doesn't shock them, right? It was, they knew what was going on. But for me as a 6-year-old, it was a completely horrific experience and traumatic experience. And I remember from that moment forward, I was like, all men are bastards, like I can't trust anyone. I can't trust my parents. I can't trust myself because I couldn't save the sheep. So we make it mean things, right? So I made it mean all these things, like I'm not good enough. I couldn't save the sheep. Like people are nasty. Why would you want to live in the world, etc. I made it mean all these things. And then when I was in the Landmark Forum in 2006, I actually, for the first time, I remembered this incident, and I called my dad up and had a conversation about it. I said, Dad, I'm so sorry. I said, I have hated you ever since this happened. I have hated you because of this. And so much made sense. It was like all the pieces of where I'd been rebellious and where I felt like I didn't fit in. And, it started there. And he said, for the first time, he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I had no idea you would be impacted like that. He said, for us, it was a Greek Orthodox tradition. We were, it was like, it comes from the story of Job in the Bible, where Job wanted to sacrifice his son for God, and God said, no, sacrifice a sheep instead. That's where the whole thing comes from. So it's a really ancient, sort of,
well, and if they had just taken the time to explain to you, like, hey, notice, Mom and Dad, that your child is bonding with this animal and that you are going to take it away. If you don't explain that, that's going to be a big shock to the system.
Exactly.
And, obviously these are things that we're aware of today, but
yes,
there's still a lot of people out there processing through the things that people didn't know well enough to help support kids through and explain what was happening. They just expect you to understand or know the things that they know in some weird way.
Yes, exactly. And like my brother was 2 years older than me. He wasn't impacted at all because he didn't bond with that sheep. And that's the thing. From a very young age, I always loved animals. I always bonded with, I always, just loved it. Even, I would watch spiders weave their webs outside my window and be fascinated by it. I would watch snails in the garden and think, wow, look at this extraordinary animal. Like I just, I just loved all creatures, and that was a massive learning for me. And then for Dad to apologize, for us to actually have a conversation about it, was like I got my dad back, and now we have the closest relationship, and I'm getting a bit emotional because the last few months have been really challenging for our family. My mum had a fall back a week before Christmas, actually. About 5 months ago, she had a fall under the care of a carer in her house in Bribie Island. And Mum's had dementia for 10 years. Mum and Dad have been married for 55 years. Dad's 87, Mum's 81. And Mum's now had to go in a nursing home because she hasn't been able to walk since the fall. And the fall, actually, she ended up breaking her arm, but there's nothing wrong with her legs, but because she's got dementia and she's now been bed bound for so long and hasn't had enough rehab, we've had to put her in a nursing home, which has been really, really challenging. And Dad's, he's had 4 heart attacks, prostate cancer, diabetes. He's a trooper.
Wow.
He's amazing at 87, And so now I do what I can to be with them and to appreciate them, because, we never know when we're going to lose our loved ones, right? When they're not going to be here, at least in this version of reality that we have in this world. That I think it's so precious. So self-awareness has been really, really important on this journey, and doing the inner work. Like, I've invested at least $1 million in my business and personal development now since 2005. One of the first courses I did was a One Life course, and then I did multiple business and networking and hypnosis. I've done NLP. I've done all sorts of different things since then. But really, that was a pivotal one. Doing the Landmark Forum back in 2006 was a major one. And then, 2007, I became an introduction leader with Landmark. I did a self-expression and leadership program in 2007, which is where I started the world's first Animal Action Day. And we've now done 18 annual events, raising awareness and appreciation for animals, awareness, appreciation, and raising funds for different charities every year, and raising awareness for animals. So now I look back at that sheep, and I'm so grateful for that sacrifice of that sheep, because it's like the sacrifice of my animal action, life that I've had, and helping people appreciate our beautiful animals.
I love that.
Now
That's
you know
beautiful.
why the introduction was so important today.
Yes.
I do want to say thank you for being vulnerable. I think that's a lot of people, we live in a society where it's not okay to be emotional publicly. So I do appreciate that you have that vulnerability and the courage to do that and share that story, and how impactful it was for you, but also the good that came from your facing of it, right? The good that came from it, because that's something else that people don't often expect to come from facing these things, right? Like, that sort of self-healing journey sometimes kind of stops at, well, I know where it came from, and I know what it was, so okay, now it's on me to heal that. But you've been able to extrapolate out from that the good things in your life that developed, and the things that you became really passionate about for it, right? So the finding the good in the contrast experiences and in the traumatic experiences, right, I think is like turning that pain into gold kind of thing. So good for you for being able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is the self-awareness, right? You can either choose to be the victim of your circumstances, or you can look at it as a blessing and a gift, and look for the learnings in everything. And, being a victim is never going to help anyone, right? I do believe everything happens for us, not to us, right? I do believe there's blessings in all the ups and downs of life. It's just a matter of whether we choose to view it that way. And having that state of mind, I think it really puts you in a place of empowerment in your life. Otherwise, you walk around, there's so many people walk around just in full-on drama. And if there's no drama, they'll create drama, because they've been conditioned to live in drama. We've all been conditioned through the mass media, through, think like Netflix. How many dramas are there on Netflix and on the pay TV stations? Like, it's just drama, drama, drama. We see it. There's a great movie about this called Out of Shadows, which I highly recommend people watch, the Out of Shadows documentary. It's actually featured in my Conscious Community Global Facebook group. I've got a whole lot of documentaries in there that'll blow your mind. And this Out of Shadows one is phenomenal. It's done by 2 Hollywood stunt guys, and it talks about the conditioning we've had through the education system and through Hollywood and through the media. And it asks, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we believe what we believe? And it's a great question to ask. Another great question is, what do you believe to be true that isn't, right? And so I always say to people, just question everything. But, that self-awareness, doing the inner work, always coming from a place of love. I think that's so important. Love for self and love for others, because hurt people. And for a long time, I was a people pleaser because I just wanted to belong. I just wanted to fit in, and what ended up happening is I ended up depleting my energy, being such a people pleaser and giving so much to others that I wasn't giving to myself. And then, I also realized another bit of self-awareness. Now, where my parents were from in Turkey, often the guys would hang out with the guys and the women would hang out with the women. That's just how it was over there. And so growing up, my dad would often hang out with my brother growing up, and I always wanted my dad's attention. And the only way I found I got my dad's attention was when I achieved, right? When I achieved in table tennis, when I achieved at my studies, and this actually, it was actually a blessing in disguise. Now, many years on, I look at this and I think, well, no wonder I'm so ambitious now. No wonder I'm so go, and wanting to now make the most of life. But, for a long time there, I was depressed. I was suicidal. I had invisible friends. I didn't feel I belonged. I didn't want to be in the world because I thought it was all so nasty. So I had to shift my point of view. And the only way I was able to shift my point of view was by having the self-awareness, by doing the inner work, by, surrounding myself with mentors and with people who were, above the line players. And, we know above the line, below the line are people that blame and, blame others, etc., and they have a very negative attitude. Whereas people above the line, they take responsibility for their life. They go out and they create the life that they want. And I think your environment is so important for that, and having the right coaches and mentors around you, and not making anyone wrong about that. Like Dad, many years later, Dad said to me, "Oh, I now see that I spent a lot of time with Nick, and I really, my brother Nick, and I really should have spent more time with you, and et cetera, et cetera." But like now, I'm so close to my parents. Like my brother's in Gosford. I'm with my folks now. I've been with them like 95% of the time since my mum had the fall 5 months ago. I've been living between Gold Coast and Bribie Island to be with them and to do what I can to support them. And even last night I was in the nursing home with Mum I was there from about 5 o'clock till about 11 o'clock. So 6 hours I spent with Mum in the nursing home, and I put some comedies on. We watched Mr. Bean, we watched George and Mildred, we watched I Dream of Jeannie. We put all these comedies on. And then I watched a documentary with her afterwards, which was around a beautiful kangaroo sanctuary that was in New South Wales. They had huge fires through Australia quite a few years ago, and it killed off 500 million animals and wildlife. And there's this beautiful documentary that's been done, and it's called Bond, I believe. It's about this lady in New South Wales who rescued a whole lot of kangaroos, and most of them survived the fire. And it just showed the devastation that happened after the fire, and how she rebuilt after the fire, and all these kangaroos. And it's like a sanctuary of over 20 kangaroos. It's an extraordinary place. And I was in tears watching this, because one of my goals is to have animal sanctuary, right? And I want to do it. I want to actually, rescue animals and, and be able to provide a safe sanctuary for our wildlife. So it was really, really moving, so that's the kind of thing I now do. I make the time to really have that quality time with my parents.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And no matter what we think of our parents, because often a lot of our issues, the issues in the tissues, as they say, a lot of our issues are often from our parents, right? No matter what we think of them, we have to be grateful, surely, that we have the gift of life thanks to our parents, right? If nothing else, we can be grateful for that. You're here on the planet because your parents came together, right? And here you are, and you're a miracle of life. Like, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary we're all here. And in fact, that we're even having this conversation, when you think of the, 9 billion people on the planet, and we might meet 100,000 in our lifetime. It's extraordinary the people we meet. Everyone is here to either teach us something or we teach them something. And, it's a beautiful thing with everyone we meet. And particularly with those that challenge us, because, they help us grow, they help us evolve, they help us see things that we might not have seen otherwise.
Thank you, Aldwyn. You use a very strong word repetitively, and you started off this pathway today with a really, really deep word that a lot of people can resonate with here. And that is that this is all an experience.
Yes.
That level of awareness and that shift of perspective can save a life. So thank you for your authenticity, because it is what the planet is calling upon, and it is part of the purpose, as you've shared with us today, as to why you incarnated on this planet as the media queen that you've become. You have very clear diligence in the pathway that brought you up to the moments where you had to make critical decisions within yourself. Empathy is a powerful tool. We speak about it a lot here. It is an extreme to this planet, one that has been overlooked, subdued, and conditioned for eons. When you speak about being a child and witnessing that particular event and the lead up to that event, finding yourself being embarrassed, being put on the spot, and having to grow your awareness in a space immediately that you never asked for, it does definitely perpetuate the pathway forward that people can start to understand about how you continually invested in that self-awareness. And you declare that quite confidently with the amount you've invested into yourself and that you claim. So if anybody can take anything from that, it is that if you incarnate on this planet and you're seeing things a certain way, that is your purpose. You did say we are often close to our genius and it's guys. It's not easy to feel our feelings, and it's not easy to be navigating those feelings around people in our environment who don't also support that based on the conditioning and programming that they've experienced. But that deep understanding that you express here today of understanding that they were just doing the best that they could and you're doing the best that you can creates what this world deeply loathes for: harmony and acceptance. The two components of this experience. So through connection and you sharing that today, I think our audience are going to grow dramatically because I share a commonality with you as a fellow Brisbaner, and we have this resilience. And I'm sure a lot of the other followers and listeners will agree with us as they come aboard. There is a resilience throughout Queenslanders that is, it's unspoken of. We're battlers. We fortify and we're formidable and we thrive and we strive and we continually get back up and we support each other. Given that you're a media queen and you've experienced everything that you have, could you please tell us how that drives you now as the humanitarian that you've evolved and become to be? And where is that purpose taking you? What is the point of Mass Media Queen? Who are you here to impact? How are you getting that message out? And where is it going to serve the most?
Thank you, Murray. Wow. Geez, so many questions in that. That's it's been one hell of a ride, let me tell you. I'm 51. I can't believe I'm 51. I feel about 30. And people usually say, oh
I
my
can't
gosh.
believe you're 51 either because
30.
you don't look it. You do look 30. So good for you. Like everybody, follow Aldwyn's beauty regimen too. Like
We
what?
accept all
We're
the
gonna
beauty
get
tips.
that later.
Thank you. Well, we have filters now, which is awesome. Filters on TikTok, etc. I'm loving doing the TikTok lives lately because the filters are brilliant, make you look 10 years younger. But I think no matter what age you are, I think it is about embracing life and being grateful for your life. And I know I'm not alone now. For a long time through my life, I felt so alone. I felt like the black sheep through a lot of my life. And now I know I'm not alone. And I think the more I've connected with my faith, I think that has really helped me realize I'm not alone. But also, I know that we have 14 generations of DNA in us. And I've done breathwork sessions where I've seen my ancestors come in. I've done, I did a plant medicine weekend as well where I saw my ancestors come in. And I know that my ancestors are with me, and I feel them. I can feel them supporting me. Now, interestingly, in my history, just a few generations back, my great-grandparents were kulaks in the Ukraine. And what happened for the kulaks in the Ukraine when Stalin took over in the early 1900s, they killed off 30,000 kulaks. And the kulaks were what they called the wealthy class because they wanted to, with communism, they wanted to make everyone the same class, right? So my great-grandparents were farmers and they were outside of Kiev. And Stalin's men turned up one day to their property and they said, get off your land. And they were like, where are we going to go? It's minus 20 degrees outside. And they took them out the front of the house and they hung them. This is my dad's grandparents. And then their son, which is my dad's dad, my granddad, he was in another part of the Ukraine at the time. And he started to now speak up against the government about what they'd done and that they'd killed his parents. And his friends came to him and said, you better get out of here. Now they're coming to kill you as well. And so he then ran away to Turkey and met my dad's mum, who was Greek. And that's how the Greek-Turkish-Ukrainian thing came about. So with that, isn't it interesting that in my heritage, in my DNA, I have people who were killed for stepping up and who were running for their life for speaking up. And this is exactly what I do with my business now. This is exactly why I do what I do. I help people step up and speak up. And I'm very grateful that I live in Australia, where we have more freedom than some parts of the world, where I know in Thailand, if you speak against the king in Thailand, you'll get killed. Like, they're very open about that, and people do disappear. And, there is always a chance that could happen. But are you going to choose to live in fear, or are you going to be true to yourself? And me being true to myself is helping people step up and speak up. And that started with me, right? Because I was very shut down for a long time. I was challenged speaking up for such a long time. In fact, I've had several near-death experiences, and some of them had to do with the throat, which is, of course, your throat chakra is your communication center. I had an ex-boyfriend that strangled me at 22 and almost killed me. I've had a quinsy in my throat. I was at a Woodford Folk Festival many years ago where I was emceeing out there, and my throat just started to get really, really sore on one side, and then my throat started to swell up, and I didn't realize I had this quinsy in my throat, which basically like an abscess at the back of your tonsil that it can swell, and in a few days it can kill you because it blocks your airways. And then it ended up in hospital over that. I had another near-death experience a few years ago. I got swept out to sea in Coffs Harbour, and I've had all these experiences in my life. That was a big one. Yeah, a few years ago, I got swept out to sea, about 1 kilometre out to sea in Coffs Harbour, and I survived it when so many others haven't. And I think to myself, well, why do I go through these challenges? Why have I been through these challenges? And often it's because there's some major learnings. And if I don't speak up about something that I see that, again, back to where I started, that angers me or upsets me, because I think these are signs. If you're moved by something, if you're angry or upset by something, usually that's how I measure it, then I see it as a sign to do something about it. If we don't do something about it, we are being part of the problem. I truly believe that. And we can do the smallest thing about it. We can share a post about something. Right now with social media, I mean, the whole world has changed. The whole game has changed now. You don't have to be a qualified journalist now to do a show like this, right? Anyone can start their own show. In fact, in 2018, we had 500,000 podcasts. Now we have over 5 million podcasts worldwide. Now, for a lot of people, they don't do more than 3 podcasts. Even less people do more than 10 podcasts because they just don't have the staying power with it often, or they just want, quick leads and sales from it. And that's not the reason to do a podcast, right? So now what I do, I help people package up their genius, be seen, heard, and known through the mass media. So we get people into TV, radio, print, and also we help them package up their social media and get out through the social media and share their message with the world, share their impact with the world. And really, I was on another podcast the other day and I was asked, if there's one thing you could change in the world, what would it be? If there's one thing you could change in the world, what would it be? And I'd love to hear from your viewers in the comments. If there's one thing you'd change in the world, what would it be? I'd love to hear from both of you as well. And what I answered to that is I would create world peace. And world peace starts with being kind to yourself, being kind to others, loving yourself, loving your others, not in an arrogant way, but actually fully loving and accepting that you are here on the planet for a reason. And you are seeing the things and having the human experience you're having as a spiritual being, having this human experience for a reason, because there's impact to be made. And if you don't speak up, you're going to be one of the 90% of people who die with regrets. And we know that 1/3 of people die by the age of 65. 1/3 of the population die by 65. And my goal is to help increase that 10% that do die without any regrets, to actually increase that so that more people have full lives and lives they love, and don't die with regrets, basically, that they they fully enjoy and love their lives and love themselves. Because of course hurt people, which is at the foundation of all animal cruelty and all wars and all of that kind of stuff, right, is hurt people hurting people, or people doing things on ego or because they want to look good or whatever. Whereas we are all we're all amazing. We're all connected. We're all, we are all extraordinary, right? It's just that some human behaviors can cause harm and some don't. So are you going to choose to cause harm to yourself or others? As I did for many years, I was, as I say, very shut down. I was self-destructive. I used to drink a lot, smoke a lot. I was doing drugs. I was doing whatever I could to kill myself. I wasn't appreciating my life. And I wasn't appreciating what a magnificent world it was. I was totally skewed. And it's like the yin yang of life.
Mm.
Are we going to choose to look at the dark side of life, or are we going to choose to look at the light side of life? And of course, we're going to have both in our human experience. It's like the roller coaster ride of life, right? We're going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. Otherwise, I mean, if we flatline, it's like you're dead, right? So there's going to be times we're going to feel amazing. There's going to be times we feel crap. And it's like, okay, well, maybe when you feel crap, maybe there's a sign there to do some self-nurturing, some self-care, and not feel guilty about it, right? Maybe it's, and nowadays I do that. I make time for yoga, for the beach. I did Tai Chi on the beach with my dad yesterday. I had to swim in the ocean. I do these things now without feeling guilty about it. And I think this is so important, to make time for self-care, because the more that you have self-care and the more that you love yourself and appreciate yourself, the more you will appreciate others. And this is where world peace will happen, is one person at a time, one person doing the inner work at a time, which then the ripple effect of that on everyone around them. And part of that is being able to speak up about what you believe in. If you have self-confidence, you will speak up about stuff. You won't worry about what other people think. But how many people do worry about what other people think, right? Way too many people. You're going to get your lovers and your haters no matter what you do, right? So a big thing I do too is to have people realize how amazing they are, and that they do have a great story to share. And in fact, your X factor is your story. Everyone has a story. I don't care what you think. Your X factor is your story. And we want to hear your story. We want to hear your ups and downs and how you've come through your challenges. And this is exactly why now we're about to launch a book called Fear to Freedom: Conscious Creators Manifesting Magic. Now, I have a chapter in about 20 different compilation books. This is the first one. I'm now teaming up with a lady called Leanne Clune. We have 11 co-authors in this book, and we're in the editing stages of the book right now. And we'll be putting a series of these out. Fear to Freedom: Conscious Creators Manifesting Magic. Because we've all had fear in our life. And I'm sure by being here, you've found a place of freedom within that, right? Or through that. Through that experience. And so this book is all about sharing the stories that people have had, of where they've had some fear, how they've come through it, and what is the wisdom that they've learned from that. And that's what I love to do. That's at the heart of what I do with my media business, is I help to package people's genius up, or help them see their genius and help them get out there to be seen, heard, and known. And I'm so grateful now for the mass media world. As much as I resisted Facebook and all social media back in the early days, I am now so grateful that we have so many ways, so many media outlets or mass media outlets to be able to share our message with the world. And I'm grateful for freedom of information channels like Rumble, BitChute, Telegram, that don't censor information as well. Because what I've seen, particularly through this whole pandemic period, I've seen a lot of censorship. I've seen fact checkers come out of the woodwork on Facebook and Google, mainly on YouTube, right? Mainly YouTube. And I still get some, fact checking that happens on YouTube, which is very, very interesting, because I always find when there's some censorship out there, I always think, well, what is there really going on here behind the scenes, right? Because if there's nothing to hide, why the censorship? There's nothing to hide. Why the censorship? And this is where I always encourage people to question everything. And particularly if you're getting, censored on something, then most likely there's some truth in it. So do a bit more digging and get informed and get empowered. Get informed, get empowered. And that's that self-awareness, and also awareness of what's going on in the world, and doing your research.
I love that. I mean, the idea of censorship in itself is just fear coming from a higher level or a broader institutional, power structure that has the ability to silence people. But, well, why do they silence people? They're afraid of what you're saying. So you're doing something right if you are getting censored, or if you are dealing with that, or if you are having conversations where you need to sort of temper your language in certain ways to avoid the algorithm that'll kick you out, or that'll get that. And I think this is also where, like, a lot of creativity comes into play for people, right? And this is something that I like to play with, making up new words, making up new ways to put words together so that the algorithm can't sort of bounce you out because it's not traditional language. So it doesn't have, you got to be kind of faster than the language learning models, right? And that's where that creativity kind of comes in. So I do appreciate that angle of it too. And I do appreciate that you want to know how other people want to change the world, because I think there's we all want to get to a place where everybody has the space they deserve to explore themselves without restrictions, without pressures from the external, without expectations of what you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be, or how you're supposed to think or feel. And this is something that I've kind of maybe you can give us your perspectives on it, because it's a thought that I've been having lately. You know, you talk about depression and you talk about like that higher level or the roller coaster. The roller coaster might not feel so much like a roller coaster if we didn't judge so much that one space is better than the other to be in, right? Every experience in the human buffet of what you can experience is valid. There's something in it. So instead of seeing someone who's in a state of depression and saying that's bad, let's get you out of it, I mean, what's to be gained by just trying to shove them out of it? Like, well, what if we flipped that on its head and said, "Oh, you're in a depressive state. Excellent. What can we learn from that? What are you exploring? What are you experiencing?" And instead of giving it a judgment of that is an undesired place to be, it's kind of that conditioning. Well, why would someone think that that's an undesirable or a bad place to be unless they were told that that was a bad place to be? What if there was no judgment of being in that space and just allowing that space to be? You might move out of it more quickly if you only just saw it as a thing, an experience, and something to learn from. We all have a little bit of that ADHD, right? And
Yes.
maybe if we had a little less judgment of where everyone was, you could move and flow and bounce through those different emotional states a lot more easily, because you would recognize them to just be an emotional state and something that has a lesson to offer, and not necessarily that like, well, there's better emotional states to be in and there's worse emotional states to be in, and you're not okay if you're in the lower levels, but if you're up here then you're good, right? So like, I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's great, Haley. That's really good. And I'll add to that too, just for you to answer on Aldwyn, because I do think that we're approaching, and you've spoken very deeply here today, so a lot are going to be insightful and awareful in their self towards this. I think that collectively and individually, we are approaching this space where terminology and words are fueled and they're charged with light energy that we assign to it. And that goes back to what you said, we give things meaning, so then we can have it there. And words like journey for me come up a lot lately in my own as a really strong anchoring point. We attach ourselves to this really deeply. I'm on the journey. I'm on the journey. It sounds very similar to I'm grinding. I'm just trying to get mine. I'm trying to get mine. And it's these containers, they put us into these altered states of attachment. And really, it's just an experience, as we've discussed here over and over again today. So I'd like you to speak on that as well, as if you could, and how we get that to a place of people just accepting that it's an experience, not a judgment, not observation, not attachment. You're just experiencing. And how can we leverage that experience to get better for the next experience, for the next person, for the next collective to learn from, as Haley's suggested.
Yes, love it. Love it, love it. Well, you know, the last few years I've been doing a fair bit of quantum work, and I came across Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness. And this, you know, this actual diagram, which really helped me. So Dr. Hawkins was a psychiatrist in America that did a whole lot of study around energy and frequency in human beings. And he found that we are 99.9% energy, frequency, and vibration as human beings. And when we feel certain emotions, we either vibrate at different hertz, right? It's actually scientifically proven. And we know our chakras or energy centers, this is all scientifically proven that we vibrate at different frequencies when we have different emotions. Now, one emotion is not necessarily better or worse than the other emotion. And I do believe life is a roller coaster ride, and there's things to learn on the whole journey. Absolutely. And I think how we view that journey is crucial, because when we have what they call the lower vibration down here, when we're which is things like shame, you're at 20 hertz when you're in shame. You know, fear is at 100 hertz, anger is 150 or around there, right? You're all down like a sort of 150 and below when you have guilt, shame, fear, all those kind of things.
Worry.
It's a very stuck, worry. It's a stuck and a very stuck emotion. So you might feel a bit stuck, and that's why I say when you're down on the bottom of this roller coaster ride, there's going to be times you're going to be stuck. However, in that stuckness, maybe it's a sign to just take a moment and to go, okay, what is, as you say, what is the learning here, right? What is there for me to get here? And then as we lift our vibration, they call it love and above, right? Love is at 528 hertz. Joy and gratitude, we're at 540 hertz. These are some of the highest vibrations at the top of the chart. And you can look this up online. Look up Dr. Hawkins' Scale of Consciousness. In fact, I have the map of consciousness in the Conscious Community Global Facebook group, which you can actually see it in there. It's pinned to the top. Above that, so you've got joy and gratitude at 540. Peace is at 600, right? World peace, 600. Enlightenment, 700 plus, right? Enlightenment's your highest vibration in this scale. So I think it's very important. I love what you're saying, because it's not necessarily bad to be stuck. There's times that we need to go down there. There's like to feel the emotions. The healing is in the feeling, right? To fully feel the emotions, to cry when you need to cry. We have tear ducts for a reason, to express yourself, to let it out. You know, if you need to be angry, you can go and scream it out in the bush somewhere. You don't have to throw something at someone, right? You don't have to hurt someone else if you're angry, right? Do express it, but be kind to others while you're doing it, right? You don't need to dump your crap on people, you know. So I think, I think it's so important to fully embrace the journey of life. And as they say, you know, the stars shine brightest in a dark sky, right? If it wasn't for the dark sky, we wouldn't see the bright stars, right? If it wasn't for the dark times we've had in our life, we wouldn't appreciate the lighter times. We wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't be able to come to a place of gratitude. So for me, it's like, okay, so if you're gonna be stuck, well, how long are you going to choose to stay stuck is the question, right? How long? Because we choose to stay there often, and this is where I've had depression. I've been there for months at a time in the past. You know, I've had 4 friends suicide. You know, and this is the thing is, you know, 1 million people a year worldwide suicide who go into these places and fall off. They fall off the roller coaster ride because they just can't handle it. So the trick is to keep that seatbelt on, right? Keep the seatbelt on this roller coaster ride. Hang in there, right? Because there's always a breakthrough at the end of every breakdown if you choose to move through it, right? And this is where I've noticed in my life, back to self-awareness again, I've had this high adrenaline lifestyle. You know, in the media, it's constant deadlines. It's go, go, go. You know, there's times, you know, you've got to get the story done or else, you know, you don't get the paper out in time or whatever, right? So it's go, go, go. So I've had this high adrenaline lifestyle, and then the universe, God, whatever, is like, you know, it's hit me in the face with sickness, maybe, right? I might get a cold or and it's like, okay, so then I'm feeling crap at times. So then I'll go down and I'll it's like time out. Okay, now I need to rest. Okay, this is telling me I need to rest for a bit, right? Or I need to maybe look at what I'm putting into my body, what I'm fueling my body with, and give myself, you know, things like raw garlic, for example, has been a great thing for me. Every time I've got sick, I just hit it with the raw garlic, and 1 or 2 days I'm better, right? Whereas a lot of people go on antibiotics and they might still be sick for another week or 2 on the antibiotics. And we know antibiotics kill the good and the bad bacteria in our body, but that's a whole other topic.
I was going to say that's a whole rabbit hole podcast.
That's a whole other topic.
Go down.
That's the whole other topic. But, you know, finding out what's going to, you know, work best for your body, you know, work with the natural medicines and, you know, like the, you know, Indigenous people of Australia did for years, you know, for millions of years. They worked off the land. You know, the land was their hardware store, and it was their medicine as well, you know, from the plants, etc. So
The hardware store.
The hardware store. That's what actually. So I was on a tour with some local First Nations people up in Mossman, up near Cairns, a while ago, and we did this tour through the forest, and that's what they said. They said the First Nations people always considered the rainforest was their hardware store. You know, that's where they got everything.
That's so great. That actually brings me up to my point that came up through you speaking, and I would like you to digress a bit further on this, because your journey has been very unique, and a lot of people that you've got their attention, and they're like, you know, there's people that are teetering on their own spiritual journeys of awareness and awakening, and then there's others that are bridging towards like, okay, I'm seeing social media and it's starting to pop up for me. When you speak, Aldwyn, it's very clear, all right? Observing you, and others can experience this for themselves. You speak from a place of acceptance, not judgment. How do you transition from that place of judgment to acceptance, knowing that this is an experience and we are on a journey, both individually and collectively as one, contributing to the whole? How do we get out of that state of judgment, self-judgment of self, judgment of others? Because it's in these states that we're not in the flow. we miss the acceptance, and we struggle to learn the lesson that's readily available to us always?
Yes, great question. And I think it's a practice, to be honest, because I think we all judge at different times, whether we admit it or not. We judge. I mean, I have this saying for people that bury their head in the sand and that don't want to do their research on things in the world and just believe everything the mainstream media tells them. I call them num-nums. Now, num-nums is probably not the best sort of term. It's probably quite judgmental, right? But I kind of say it in a kind of funny way. I go, well, there's some more num-nums there, So it's kind of like, but all num-nums could actually shift from being a num-num by actually questioning what's going on in the world. This is my judgment, right? This is my perception, is that, some people are very happy to bury their head in the sand and to believe everything the mainstream media tells them. And then others see the evidence for themselves and see they've been lied to for years about all sorts of things and actually starting to question their version of reality. Right. And these are the more awakened souls that I'm seeing more and more around the place, which is awesome. But how to shift from judgment? It's a great question, because I know that I still judge. As much as I hate to admit it, I know I do. Right. And I think
your authenticity is what everybody wants. So this is why it's such a great question, because you
Yeah.
are in the transitional state.
It's a great question. And I think it's an ongoing practice. And I think also judging ourselves, I think we can be really hard on ourselves. I know I can be so hard on myself, right? Because I'm a high achiever. And when you're a high achiever and when you're wanting to go out and change the world, when you're playing a big game in life, you are going to be challenged. You're going to be consistently challenged. You're going to be challenged by your own thoughts. You're going to be challenged by the people around you. You're going to be challenged by your haters on social media. You're going to be consistently challenged. And this is where having that resilience is so important, and being true to why you're here and why you're doing what you're doing, and how passionate are you about shifting something out there. What is it that moves you? What is it that moves you into action? And in fact, partly why I started the world's first Animal Action Day is not just that I did the Landmark Self-Expression Leadership Program, which was a phenomenal program. And actually out of that program, Clean Up Australia Day, Red Nose Day, Daffodil Day, all these things came out of people that did that program. How it wasn't just that, it was that I saw a documentary, and the documentary was called Earthlings. And Earthlings showed how people have used animals for food, clothing, scientific research. It's one of those documentaries that is very hard to watch. Like, people say, oh, I can't watch that kind of documentary. Like, it shows a lot of animal cruelty, right? Literally, it was so hard to watch, but it was such an eye-opener. And by the end of that documentary, I was literally holding my throat and crying at the end. And I thought to myself, it was like this inner calling that was like coming out, like, I have to do more for animals. For years I'd seen animal cruelty and I didn't know what to do about it, right? And I thought I just have to. It was like that final straw that it's like, I have to do something. Okay, what can I do? I thought, okay, well, I'll put a fun day on I'll encourage action for animals. And okay, what do we call it? Animal Action Day. What's it about? Awareness, appreciation, respect for animals. Okay, let's do it. We had 30 performers and speakers at our first event. We've had world-class performers like Herb Armstrong, Louis Armstrong's grandsons performed. We've had Roger Davey from Vivace Entertainment. We've had some of the world's best opera singers. We've had some phenomenal performers and speakers over the years that have donated their time. We had a guy from the Seekers. We've had so many phenomenal people have all donated their time for different causes over the years. And it starts with that seed of actually taking action, encouraging others to take action, that ripple effect of change that can happen when you step into honoring what it is that moves you, and honoring the signs and taking action, and how that can impact change all around you. And it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage. It takes doing the inner work. It takes building the confidence. I wasn't always a fantastic speaker. I was very shy back in the day. I've done so many different speaking courses and so much work on myself to speak the way I do. And I still say ums and ahs, and I still stuff up when I speak. And it doesn't matter how much work you do on yourself and how many public speaking courses you do, you're a human being. There's going to be times
you're going to be a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's so bad about that, right? We came here to be human beings. That was the entire point of incarnating, was to experience being a human being.
Exactly. And it's honoring all of it, and it's celebrating yourself and celebrating the journey, celebrating the wins, really, really appreciating life. And I think this is where gratitude has been such a huge thing for me. And I think moving from judgment to acceptance, I think it comes with being grateful for everything. And I heard something online. There was a Christian speaker online the other day who said, bless and be blessed. Bless and be blessed.
Mm,
And I thought, what a beautiful thing. Bless and be blessed. It's really stuck with me, And even when
mm,
people are being nasty to you, send them love, send them love. And even the num-nums, affectionately, the num-nums, I send them love. I send all num-nums love. I send all my ex-boyfriends love. I send all my, I send everyone in the world who I've ever met, whether I've had a great, uplifting experience or whether I've had a sort of more, I say negative experience. If you're feeling crap, it's, I generally will think, well, feeling crap is generally not how I want to feel in my life. I want to feel a heightened experience of life as much as possible. However, if I'm feeling crap, there's times I need to honor that and I need to get the learning from that. And maybe I need to take some time out. And this is going back to that, adrenaline, go lifestyle that I've had, and then crash, right? This has been my cycle, right? Go, crash, right? Because we all have sort of ways that we do life. And I've noticed that in my life where I've had these ups and downs. Nowadays, it's more of an equilibrium because I've learned to manage my state better. I've learned to make the time for the self-care and for doing, the inner work and for getting the right mentors around me and hanging out in the right environments, and actually also setting boundaries, because I've had a lot of negative people around me in my life, and not letting that get to you. You've got to toughen yourself to criticism if you're going to put yourself out there. If you're going to share your message with the world, you have to toughen yourself to criticism, because otherwise you will not make it through. And I've seen this with multiple people I've interviewed over the years. I've had the great fortune of interviewing people like Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Cyndi Lauper, Debbie Harry, Blondie. Just the other day, I interviewed someone from the Wiggles, actually just last week at the Blues on Broadbeach Festival, Murray Cook.
wow.
He was awesome. You can go on my Facebook. You'll see the interview I did with Murray Cook.
I will.
Oh, I love it.
From the Wiggles. He was the Red Wiggle, and now he's in this soul groove band, which is really cool, out of Sydney. So they're at the Blues on Broadbeach Festival. With all these people, these celebrities, they're human beings just like you and I. They go to the bathroom, they have showers, I'm sure, occasionally.
They have shadows. They have negative thoughts. They have bad days.
Yes,
They judge people. They left aware. I'm sure they are.
Exactly. But part of the reason that they're celebrities is because they have followed their passions. They do what they love, and this is my number one tip I will give to people, is to notice in your life, what is it that when you do it, it actually gives you energy? What is it that you love that gives you joy? And this is in the back to the Dr. Hawkins scale of consciousness, right? Joy, you're at 540 hertz. Love and above, love, joy, gratitude, peace, enlightenment. If you want to have this amazing experience of life where you're fully in life, right? You're not just sort of, like Groundhog Day, just doing the same old motions again, but you're actually fully experiencing life. And, for me, partly fully experiencing life, like yesterday, I was lying on the grass at Bribie Island, looking up at the trees, looking up at the birds, looking up at the clouds moving through the sky, thinking, wow, what an extraordinary world it is. And then this thought came to me that this bird could actually poop on my head now because it was sitting right above me.
Well, I mean, listen, there are some people who say that that's incredibly lucky. So if the bird poop on you, it's time to buy a lotto ticket, right?
Exactly. And that was the next thought I had. I thought, well, it's probably lucky if I get pooed on by those birds. But it's just it's extraordinary, how beautiful the world is when we choose to see it that way. It's like, there's a sunrise and a sunset every day, and it's our choice whether we show up for it.
I love that. That's one of the things that is coming up for me, is a line from the end of the movie Secret Garden, where she says, the whole world is a garden if you can see it that way, right? And
beautiful.
It is. It's so true. It's lost Murray for a hot second. Don't worry, he'll be back. Just so much energy in what's happening. We frazzled out the internet. We're so high vibing. You get to those higher hertz vibrations and the internet can't handle it, and technology goes a little wonky, and those things just happen.
Yeah, I get it.
It frequently happens to me. I wonder if we could just maybe, I know we've had you for about an hour, but if I could maybe just get a little bit of your perspective, because this is something that we've touched on just a little bit. and something that I think about when I think about the movie The Secret Garden, honestly. But not just the experiences in our life that affect the way that we see the world. There he is. Don't worry, we already.
My internet just said, "You have fun by yourself. I'll take a break."
No, we said it was the high vibes. Once you get into that higher frequency, it frazzles out the electronics.
Yeah,
We love it.
But if we could just take a moment to like maybe wrap back around to the stories and giving things meaning. Being someone who's in the media and experiences sort of the way that you have seen how media affects the way that people think. What sort of things do you notice about fictional media that also affect or inform people's identity? And this is a thing that I think about again with that movie, The Secret Garden. Like, for movies from childhood, for me, I'm like, I don't think I recognized how much the energy or the concepts or the things in those movies I resonated with or identified with or sort of emotionally could feel and attach to as a kid that informed my identity in a lot of ways and how I saw myself. And, what sort of things maybe do you see in those spaces, being the media queen that you are? And what kind of things, I guess, what sort of shifts in media and particularly in entertainment would you like to see because of how it can affect and inform people's identity?
Oh gosh, that's massive. Look, firstly, watch the Out of Shadows documentary. I highly recommend watch that film because it shows you how we've been conditioned, how our identities have been formed through the mass media, through the conditioning. And they call it channeling, right? Media channels, media programs. Like we're actually being channeled and programmed through the mass media all the time.
Yeah.
And it's actually when you get the awareness of it and that's when things will shift. For example, when COVID came about, I knew in my gut, I was like, oh, there's something off about this. I thought, I don't know what it is, but I know in my gut there's something off about this, right? And I was already kind of awake. I interviewed David Icke back in 2016 and I'd already started questioning.
David Icke.
Yeah, started questioning my version of reality back then. And, we saw with 9/11, right? 9/11. I mean, how many times did we see those planes go into the towers and twin towers? And it was actually when a friend said to me, oh, 9/11 was an inside job, don't you? And I said, what do you mean? And this is where my turning point was. What do you mean it's an inside job? And then he started to show me all these documentaries, and David Icke was one of the first ones I started to watch. And all these different, videos, documentaries. Back then, there wasn't as much censorship on YouTube as you see now. And there were things out there that showed the press release was ready to go out 3 weeks before it happened. It showed how that there were bombs placed within the building and how the way the building went down was not, that's not normally how a building would go down if it was hit by planes. So there was a lot more going on than met the eye. Some people were told not to go to work that day, right? There was a whole lot. And I mean, this has all come out since then, right? All this has come out. And I think just like, why would the American government or whoever's behind this, why would they do that to its own people? Why would they kill thousands of their own people and create this big scene? Well, what happened after that? You got a question. Well, the war on terror happened after that, didn't it? The war on terror happened immediately after that. And then, there was invasions happening into certain countries where probably America shouldn't have been, right? However, there's oil in those countries and there's, so really if you want to know what's going on in the world, follow the money trail, right? And this is where the Thrive documentaries are also brilliant. I highly recommend watch Thrive. There's Thrive 1 and Thrive 2. They are brilliant as well. They will show you a lot about what's going on in the world. So the minute you start to question and you start to research, you start to see a different version of reality, which will then change the way that you show up, that your identity shows up, that if you choose to act on that. Now, some people go, oh, it's conspiracy theory. The term conspiracy theory was created by the CIA in the 1950s to knock anyone who spoke against the government. Now, the most deaths that we've ever seen worldwide are from democide, are from government, right? Governments have created the most death that we have worldwide, right? Through wars, etc., right? Look it up, democide stats, it'll blow you away. So actually getting conscious to this is half the thing, is actually realizing that you've been operating unconsciously now choosing to operate consciously, as in, and this comes with awareness, it comes with research, it comes with questioning everything. And at the same time, also noticing your energy while you're questioning things, because there's going to be times you're going to feel very upset by some of the things you're going to research. You're going to feel very angry, right? You're going to go into these very contracted states. You know, you're going to feel maybe some shame and some grief. And like grief is a big one now. Grief is massive, right? There's a lot of collective, you know, world grief going on at the moment. And so really being able to then go, oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm feeling some grief at the moment. Okay, how can I shift through this? Okay, maybe being grateful for what I've just learned, because now I can make an informed choice, and coming back to gratitude, right? So then, you know, having that awareness is a huge thing. And with your identity, well, I think it's interesting because now with social media, we have cyberbullying, right? And a lot of people can, you know, we know people have died over cyberbullying. Some people have reacted so badly, they've gone and killed themselves, right? And so this one statement has made a massive difference to me, and I've shared it already. Hurt people, hurt people. Hurt people, hurt people, and heal people, heal people. Okay. And this comes down to taking 100% personal responsibility for healing yourself, right? In all aspects. If you're feeling a certain emotion right now that you don't want to be feeling, then what is it going to take to get the healing, right? What is it going to take? And sometimes it's reaching out, you know, getting Reiki done, for example, what Murray does, you know, doing the work, getting the work, or having people, surround yourself with people who can help lift you out of these dark places, because often we're so close to it that we don't see it. We don't see what our identity is, right? Other people say, oh, you're like this. I mean, you'll both have your opinions about me, right? Which we could say are judgments, you know, whether we're conscious of it. I mean, everyone tuning in will have their opinions about all of us, right? And, you know, it's like we all have an opinion about Donald Trump, don't we? We all have an opinion. I just mentioned that name and it triggers people, right? Some people love Donald Trump. Some people hate Donald Trump. But regardless of what you think of Donald Trump, I'm sure most of us have never even met the guy, right? So where are we making our judgments from? Where you know, we're from the mass media, from the research we've done, etc., right? From listening to him on podcasts like the Joe Rogan podcast that was with Donald Trump. That was an interesting one to watch. But you know, where do we come up with these ideas of what we think people are like? And whatever you think of Donald Trump, you've got to admire the guy's resilience. You've got to admire the fact that he keeps going out there, and he's had two death attempts, and he just keeps going out there, and he speaks.
I mean, he's a manifester, whether you want to give him the credit for it or not. He speaks things into existence, whether you want to give him the credit for it or not. And reality and how much people might kick and scream against it clearly doesn't matter, right? He just keeps believing in what he wants to experience, and so he continues to. So he is, you know, you love him or hate him, or love it or hate it, he does demonstrate what belief in yourself or what your personal belief structures do to affect reality. You can't deny that reality is affected by his belief structures and the number of people who adhere to his belief structures and the things he speaks out loud, right? So if nothing else, he's demonstrating that this reality is, you know, affected by what you speak and what you believe.
Yes. Exactly, 100%. And it's the same with us. There'll be people watching us right now that are going to have their judgments, right? And they've most likely never met us, but they're judging us on what we're saying and, you know, what we look like. And, you know, we all do it, whether we admit it or not. And I think it'd be great to live in a non-judgmental world. I mean, if I was to see someone being cruel to animals, I'm going to have an immediate judgment about that. And I'm going to want to take action, right, straight away. And, you know, if by the way, if anyone does see an animal cruelty, one of the first things you can do is you can film it, right? Get it on, get the evidence if you see something going on, right, that you're not happy about, but also speak up about it in a safe manner. I mean, you know, as I say, if we don't speak up about it, we're being part of the problem. I think with anything, I think, you know, if we've been gifted with an opportunity to create impact, which we all have the opportunity to create impact now through social media and through our circles, even our immediate circles, right? We all impact our surroundings, whether we're conscious of it or not. It's just a question of how much do you want to create change? How much do you want to impact? And it does start one person at a time, one message at a time. And being committed, not attached, is another great thing I heard from a landmark course that I did. Be committed, not attached. And this is with everything in life. Like, I'm committed that we have world peace. I'm committed that people are kind to animals and they're kind to themselves, and that, you know, that we have a peaceful, beautiful planet where people aren't being nasty to themselves and others. I'm committed to that. I'm not attached to what that's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So
how
this,
it comes about.
yeah, or how it comes about. And this is part of what drives me, right, is to create change in a positive way, to help inspire more kindness, to help inspire people to love their lives and live their love. You know, love your life and live your love. You've been gifted with this extraordinary gift of life. You've beaten 1 billion swimmers to get to the finish line just by being born. You know, you're 1 in 1 billion just by being born. You know, depending how excited your parents were at the time, of course, at the time of conception. But, you know, it's, you know, it's between actually 400 million to 1.2 billion is actually the stats. You know,
I love it.
how many swimmers we've beat to get to the finish line. So there's a reason.
That's so funny.
No, that is. I mean, not a
And so
visual
true.
that everybody wants, but it is very true. And it does kind of, it gives you a perspective on how significant you are and how improbable you are. The improbability of your own existence. And if that, you know, that should help people to believe in how possible things are and how good things can come about. I do love that. It's a funny little thing to think about, but it demonstrates the point.
Yes, we are star seeds, just like all these little sparkles here, right? We are star seeds, and
We are.
you know, we are made up of the same stuff that the cosmos is made up of. When we go right down to the cellular level, right, and go right down into what we're made up of, we're 99.9% energy, frequency, vibration. It's extraordinary. You know, you know, I've been watching at the nursing home where my mum is. These, you know, there's a place called Henny Penny Hatching, and these little chicks, you know, they've got this sort of incubator with eggs on one side, which is under a certain temperature, and these little chickens start to hatch out of these eggs, and then they put them in this bigger container, and all these little chicks are running around, these little like few day old chicks, and they're the most adorable little things that you've ever seen. But it's like watching the cycle of life. How extraordinary. You know, what like, it's just, it blows my mind. And if you want to see what these chicks look like, I did the video on TikTok last night, which will be shared across my socials, and you can check out these little chicks. And most people probably never seen few day old chicks, and they don't realize when they're eating chicken that they're actually eating these little chicks. Every time you have an egg, you're potentially killing a potential life of a chick.
Oh, I love it. Well, but there is also the, you know, the flip side of that coin is the endless replenishing capacity that our nature and our planet does have, that I think a lot of times we sort of overlook and don't give a lot of, you know, credence to nature's capacity to continue. I mean, look at us again, right? Our capacity to continue on through adversity and through the various things that are challenging and difficult, right? We keep on going and we keep on being the human race, and nature continues to do that as well, right? Like the endless regenerative capacity that nature has.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And, you know, watching these little chicks, what I realize, like, they've all got their little personalities. You know, some of them are more sort of out there, these little chicks, you know, coming straight up to the glass, and some of them are sort of hidden back, a bit more shy. And, you know, some of them are walking over the other ones, you know, and sort of like, it's just fascinating to watch, like, you know, the diversity. And yes, the replenishing nature, it's extraordinary. We do have abundance all around us, and what an extraordinary world. And, you know, watching this documentary about the bushfires that went through Australia several years ago that killed off all these animals and destroyed so many homes, and now here we are several years later, it's all replenished, it's all come back, and people have rebuilt.
All come back.
Some people have
stronger,
rebuilt.
better, and bigger than before. More unified, more communitied than we've ever been, than we've ever felt. More aware too. More aware, collectively aware. And it's just beautiful because it's an experience, and we keep coming back to that. And now we have that experience, like you just said, to learn from, to take from, and to grow with. And that comes from that place of non-attachment and being in a state of observation and acceptance that this happened, I'm dealing with it now. How do I go forward from this? And how do I prepare myself that if it does occur again, I can be more accepting of it, more in alignment to move with it, rather than being impacted and affected by it. It's a really big thing. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from self-awareness. So when you speak about us coming to this planet for specific experiences, we're reaching a really unique point on this planet where that awareness collectively is growing, and our self-awareness that we may actually be here for something a bit more than just giving to what we've been told to, may actually be prevalent and may be something that we may want to experience together.
Absolutely. And realizing we're not alone on this journey, you know, this human experience. We are supported by our ancestors, our angels, our guides, you know, there's definitely a whole spiritual world going on that we can't see. It's kind of like the Wi-Fi signal. We can't see the Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
We know the Wi-Fi is there, right? We know it's all happening. And so this has been a huge one, because I've often had fear of being alone, and I've often felt very alone. And actually, the more I've connected with my faith as well, connecting with God, with my my faith, whatever you believe God to be. For me, you know, I do believe in God, in a higher being, a consciousness, and you know, there's so many that have come before us, and there's so many people that will come after us. And here we are in this little short period of time on the planet. You know, it's all about, you know, how bright will you shine in the stars in the sky? How bright will you shine in impacting change for what matters to you? That's the big question. You know, what matters to you, and how can you impact change in that area?
That's a great point, Aldwyn. And, you know, in my experience, I have experienced this a lot with a lot of people who are coming into that ascension period. They ask this question, how can I just be like that? Well, it's very clearly simple. Feel your way through things. Give yourself permission to feel, because your feelings are yours. Thoughts and opinions can be others, and you can have them, and you can hang on to them and attach to them and create experience from them that may be detrimental to what you're trying to achieve for yourself. So self-awareness and self-accountability do play a hand in being in that state of acceptance and awareness to be there. Acknowledge, observe, and let it move.
Yes.
I love it. I do so appreciate you coming on and sharing. I do want, we've gone a little bit over time here, but I feel like we could probably talk for hours. So
I think we could.
I think we could. I'm excited for us to. I know we're going to have Aldwyn back again for some more. We do have your links and stuff in the description that we're going to put below, but is there anything that you would want to direct people to that you have going on that you want to particularly highlight?
Yeah, look, I'd love for people to connect on my linktree/Aldwyn, which is linktr.ee/Aldwyn. In there, which you'll share in the links, obviously, you'll see a link to my website where I have there, you can download 5 top tips to get TV coverage. You can see on my website there, and also the link to the Global Good News Challenge Facebook page, which has all the details on how to participate in the Global Good News Challenge, sharing gratitude and good news and lifting your energy, lifting the energy on the planet, helping to reduce depression and suicide rates. And you'll also see there my YouTube channel, all my other links, BitChute, Rumble, etc. I do have an open loop though, and a question for you guys before we wrap up very quickly, because we didn't cover it before. If there was one thing you could change in the world, what would it be? We didn't answer this question for you guys. I'd love to hear from you what that is.
Hayley, please go ahead.
Me first. You know, I would just add more fun. And I think that's my purpose here, is to add more fun and perspective that becomes more playful. I think that when we can view things from the perception that we are the creators of our reality, in the sense of we write what the story is, well, we can write more fun stories together that don't have to be the drama, right? We don't have to have the media and the pop culture that is centered around the painful things. You can center it around playful things. So if anything, I want there to be more play in the world. And I think the more play that we have, the more people will want to share resources, share abundance, share more compassion, because it's a lot more fun to play when everybody has more toys and more things to play with, right? And so that's what I would change in the world.
Love it.
I love that, Hayley. That's amazing. More fun, more high joy. For me, it's definitely what I'm anchored into this planet and become aware of in my purpose, which is unconditionality. I bring specific light codes to this planet through this experience of mine that are here for the next stage of evolution, which is unconditionality. I would love for this planet to experience that with less judgment, less attachment, and really fundamentally rolling into the 3 things that I'd like to close off with here today. We are a soul having a human physical experience, first and foremost. Secondly, treat others the way you wish to be treated.
Mm.
Thank you, Aldwyn, for this lesson and reminder. And thirdly, love evolves all.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I love that. And the quote from Gandhi is coming to me right now. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Be the change.
Be the change. Yeah.
Take action. Create
Yep.
joy.
Yes.
I love
If
it.
it's to be, it's up to me, right? You can do
Aldwyn,
it.
you are just too much fun. You are too much fun. This is too easy. We are going to have you
I
back
know it is.
several
It's too
times.
easy to have a
Several
conversation
times.
with Aldwyn. She's just like right in the high vibe and frequencies and so many good things to share. Thank you so much again for being vulnerable, sharing your story, for being willing to be all of the parts of yourself as a human that you are for the public, even though that's, again, maybe not necessarily what we've all been conditioned to believe is, you know, where you're allowed to do it. But I think it's a beautiful thing to share that with the world, and it's a gift that you have to give to show others that example. And I do thank you for coming on and for sharing and for being with us. And on that, Murray, any final things that you want to just thank Aldwyn?
This has been such
just excited.
Yes.
Just excited. Just filled with joy, just like Aldwyn. Can't wait to see what Mass Media Queen does next. Cannot wait.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Love your work. Love you guys. Frankie's Open Mic. What an awesome show. Out of all the podcasts I've been on, I think this is definitely one of my favorites. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's been brilliant here today. And thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Aldwyn, for being with us. Thank you, Murray Angel, for hosting with me. And I've been Haley Overseth of Frankie's Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us on Frankie's Open Mic, everybody. Do check out Aldwyn in the links below. Get on her link tree, get on her website, connect with her on LinkedIn, check out all the amazing things that she's doing. You want her positive energy in your life. We promise you do. Thank you, everybody. And until next time, big love bubbles to everyone.
Love. Thank you. Thank you.